Why, hello there, old sports. Now, to preface some things, my crippling depression has been quite crippling lately, as the name would imply. And I say this because I haven't been able to work on things very well after trying to balance all the other stuff in my life due to said depression. So, the fact that 5 Laps at Freddy's, the Five Nights at Freddy's karting video game, managed to just blow through all that and made me think, yeah, I should make a video. I feel like that should say something. I'm not sure what it should say, but it certainly is something. For those who aren't very into Five Nights at Freddy's, or who are just more casual fans, or if you just, like I said, don't keep up with the series as much as some of the more hardcore people do, 5 Laps at Freddy's, or FNaF, as I will probably refer to it as a couple times, is a go-kart, like Mario Kart sort of spin-off game that was developed by Click Team for Five Nights at Freddy's, and specifically the 10-year anniversary game lineup thing that they were doing back then. On August 7th of 2024, a demo was released to a reception. I'll give it that. The game was pretty buggy, kind of unbalanced. It was just I don't think people necessarily hated it. People didn't necessarily love it. It was kind of just there. And hey, we had other stuff to worry about with the 10th anniversary, so it kind of just faded into the background. And in the background it remained, because we haven't really gotten much news since then, for some reason, even though it's supposed to come out this year, and again, none of the official channels have really been talking about it much at all. So, on January 10th this year, when the composer for FNaF made a post on his Patreon saying that he thought the game was officially cancelled so he could share the OST, people were very confused and also mildly concerned. And again, like I said, 5 Laps at Freddy's was kind of just seen as like a cool little novelty spin-off. It wasn't like something big or important, but it was the fact that people hadn't really learned much about it, or the information on it was so tightly guarded that was kind of bothering people, or at least that's what was bothering me. And then later, on June 9th, so about 3 or 4 days ago, when I'm recording this, he deleted the post because it started to gain a lot more traction, and people actually started to be like, hey, wait a second, that's concerning, we should probably be talking about this more. And then later, via some more emails, he said that he was kind of mistaken about the game's status, but he also said that he isn't sure. And then other people, once the posts kind of became more popular, they were saying that 5 Laps at Freddy's was also cancelled. So even if Sam Dillard, who is the composer, like I mentioned, even if he said that, oh, I think it's still on, I'm just not sure, people are confused. That's what I'm trying to get across here. And as you may or may not have noticed, Scott Cawthon and Click Team have said pretty much nothing about any of this, which is extremely concerning. Now again, if you're not as dialed into Five Nights at Freddy's as like some super fans are, this is something that's been a problem for a bit. People have just not been communicating things, and by people I mean the people who are officially like associated with the series, whether that be Steelwool Studios or Click Team in this case with 5 Laps at Freddy's, and ultimately Scott Cawthon himself. People aren't communicating, and people are starting to get very frustrated about it. And while some people very much are kind of doomer posting or are kind of being hyperbolic, even if they don't think they're being hyperbolic, I think the thing is that this is a very big franchise at this point, and there needs to be better communication with the fans, especially when problems arise like this. And I think this is only worsened by the fact that Five Nights at Freddy's used to have much better communication as a franchise. And I understand that as any fandom or any series or just any media with a following grows, it becomes harder and harder to have that kind of tight-knit community where the developers or publishers or anything can kind of be more open. I understand that it becomes harder for that to sustain itself as the community grows, but there's a difference between kind of pulling back a bit and being more professional and being completely radio silent for over a year concerning a project, like with 5 Laps at Freddy's. That's not being responsible and professional. If anything, that's being unprofessional because you're not communicating at all. There's a middle ground you can reach, and I'm pretty sure that's obvious to everyone I'm telling this to, but I just feel like I should say it just in case for the people in the back. Now, I've brought this up before, and unfortunately I'll probably have to bring it up again, but isn't this what the 10th anniversary Twitter account was made for? Because I thought the idea behind that was that since we're not doing the scottgames.com stuff anymore, we could have this Twitter account that we could get official news from. But the Twitter account has done very little, all things considered, and funnily enough, they haven't even changed the profile picture to something that isn't the 10th anniversary icon, even though it's been at least a year or two since then. So I feel like if you just need something to kind of encapsulate this whole situation, I feel like you can just kind of look to the Twitter account. It's behind, it hasn't said anything in a while, and everyone is kind of just confused as to why it's still around if it's not going to do anything. Honestly, Johnny Blocks through his Twitter account has done infinitely more for this brand in terms of marketing than the official channels have. Honestly, I think Scott should just pay him to manage the social media side of the brand. Like, I feel like that isn't too much of a hot take, probably, because he's obviously been doing it for free already for a while. People trust him, so I'm sure just like giving him some more legitimacy or behind the scenes info would do wonders for the marketing, because he seems very passionate about it, again, considering he's doing this all for free for the love of the game. I guess my point is just that if FNaF wants to be this bigger mega franchise, there needs to be better communication across the board. And I understand that sometimes one or two arms of the ultimate franchise will have a hard time communicating with each other, but I feel like as the head of the franchise, Scott Cawthon should prioritize communication a lot more, and it feels like he really isn't. And I understand there's other games or like game series or game brands that people have been waiting a lot longer for games, but to kind of rip that band-aid off, something like Half-Life 3, that's more people deluding themselves into thinking the game is going to come out any day now, I'm going to be honest. I feel like there isn't even a lot of evidence pointing towards the fact that the game is actually a priority in development, if it's actually even in development at all. But with FNaF is very much still supposed to be kind of kicking, if that makes sense. It's very much still supposed to be in an active period, yet we're not getting any communication on it, therefore people, I feel like, are upset. And obviously if you're harassing people, that's going way too far, but being a bit peeved that people aren't communicating is completely reasonable in my opinion. This is something I've brought up in a previous video, but there's this idea I've heard that we haven't been getting much communication from Steelwool or Scott Cawthon about the official games due to the mess that was Security Breach, and how after building up expectations for so long, when the game came out as a buggy mess, that people were inevitably disappointed. And I see some people being like, oh, well, they don't want to communicate now because they're worried about getting people's hopes up. And again, as I mentioned previously when I brought this point up the last time, that's stupid. If you have so little faith in your own games that you feel like you can't market them without getting people disappointed when your product comes out and it's bad, that says a lot more about your development than it does about any like fans or anything like that. Hell, the fact that Jackie's Box arguably had as much impact in terms of marketing, if not more, than anything from official channels like Scott or Steelwool speaks a lot to the current state of the franchise. Now, I don't think FNaF is dead like a lot of people have been saying recently due to the lack of news on anything. I think if anything, we're kinda just in a drought of terms of content, and I think that's a completely normal part of any big franchise. But it's just the fact that it feels like the official channels have been neglecting the franchise is what I think is irking a lot of people. And the thing is, people only have so much goodwill they're willing to put forward. And I guess what I mean by that is that if you're never giving something back, people will only be willing to be so patient with you. So if the franchise starts to put out more good games and there's better communication, people will build up that goodwill. But the thing is, if you neglect the franchise, people start to burn through that. And eventually, if there isn't enough goodwill anymore, I feel like that's when a franchise actually starts to die, quote unquote. And to be a bit blunt, every media franchise will end eventually. That's just how time works. But I hope with FNaF that we go out in a blaze of glory, and not a quiet whimper as everything fades away. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whatever time you're watching this, and I'll see you on the flip side, hopefully sooner than later.